Esoteric Science Roundtable. Today's subject will be a bit of a departure from the metaphysical realms. Today we will receive a field report from Tel Aviv, and my good friend Clifford has spent the last year and 8 months in Tel Aviv, Israel, and will offer us a glimpse into Israeli life. Now, Cliff, you've also spent some time in Korea, teaching in South Korea, and you spent a month or so in Ireland, living there, or visiting there, I should say, and then again this year and 8 months that you spent in Tel Aviv in Israel. And so you've got somewhat of an idea, somewhat of a perspective of living among divided peoples. You know, in the instance of Korea, obviously, that's divided because of the political difference of ideologies and the 38th parallel that split those two into two countries. And then obviously in Ireland you have the same blood of people, again, that are isolated, but this time of their own making, really, because of their religious beliefs, that they've chosen to isolate themselves and wage a war, Protestant versus Catholic. And then in the Middle East, in the West Bank area, again, we have another point of contention between two groups, and that would be between the Israeli people and the so-called Palestinian people. And also, again, based largely, in a lot of people's estimation, on their religious ideologies, their religious beliefs, that is causing them to have this huge conflict. And it is at the core, their core beliefs that are causing this conflict, and that keep this conflagration, if you will, arising from time to time, and very much in the forefront of the media. And as we again have another instance here, another rash of violence lately, and conflict, it's again that much more in the forefront, especially in this time, this day and age. Once you get past the year 2000, and the more that's going on in the Middle East, as far as any kind of conflict, it's going to raise more flags. It's going to cause more awareness, because again, we're past the millennium, and so people are going to start thinking in terms of an Armageddon, possibly, and thinking some potential negative scenarios for a Middle East outcome. You know, whether it's going to be peaceful by their own workings together, or whether peace is going to have to be forced upon them, which I don't think can really happen. I don't think peace can be forced upon anyone, regardless. And so starting with that little broad, that little small base there, to branch out a bit, if you could touch upon a few of the ideas, a few of the, just some of the aspects of the daily life in Israel, because I myself feel like I don't have very much of a real understanding of what goes on just on a day-to-day basis, and to get maybe a point of comparison from what I'm so used to here in the States, our workaday life and everything that we have to deal with here, as opposed to how a person might go through the daily routine in Tel Aviv. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking about some of the things as far as housing, for instance. Are apartments more common, or do people have single family dwellings more so, or how is that broken down?
The housing situation is almost all apartments. Mm-hmm. There's very few private houses on private lots. Land there is very scarce. Mm-hmm. So if you want to live in the city, you're not going to be able to buy your own plot, for example. You'll probably be in a 3 or 4 story apartment building where it's pretty basic. 2 bedrooms, a salon, like a living area, and maybe 2 bathrooms if you're lucky.
And can you kind of give us an idea of how much that would cost in American dollars, roughly?
I had a 40 square meter apartment, which is something like under 200 square feet, and it was $450 a month, and you had to pay in dollars, which was not necessarily good.
That's an interesting thing, and there were some things you mentioned when we talked previously. The currency is called, again?
The shekel.
The shekel. And so they will take shekel, but they also take American Federal Reserve notes. And there are certain instances when they demand a Federal Reserve note as opposed to the indigenous currency. And what are some of the other examples where they would prefer to have dollars?
Any large purchases,
like
namely
electronics, for instance.
Electronics purchases, vehicles, houses, land, large products like that. The price is usually quoted in U.S. dollars. You can pay in the shekel, mm-hmm. but it's going to be the shekel's rate that day to the dollar.
To the dollar, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, is it common for people just to go in with maybe a suitcase full of cash and make a large purchase? Is that kosher, excuse the pun, but is that a kosher procedure?
If you don't mind walking around with a large amount of cash, I suppose that's okay. But no, most people wrote checks or used credit.
Okay.
That's how they made large purchases that way.
Same as here, pretty much. Cash was used, but also credit and check was used as well.
That's correct.
Checking account is okay.
It's a very Western country.
Right. And see, I mean, my ignorance of it, I really want to break it down to the basics because I have no point of reference really for it. I mean, sure, I could look at an encyclopedia or something like that, or I could go online and learn something, but I felt like the best way was to get it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and something that's been there recently.
Yeah.
And also, you were able to procure work while you were there as well. You were able to actually obtain a job.
That's correct. There's...
Go ahead and go through your employment, your series of employment, if you don't mind, just history that what you did there.
Okay, I did a couple of odd jobs, and that was before I was able to find a regular job. But there are many American companies operating over in Israel, largely consisting of high-tech focus. But there are construction companies over there, and I was able to meet the boss of a construction company, and he put me to work, and I was able to work there about a year exactly.
And also, I did talk to you briefly about working on the work site, working on a construction site. There was very little English spoken, and you had difficulty in some respects getting by.
I had to learn Hebrew, and I learned all my Hebrew from Chinese guys, Russian guys, Romanians, Nigerians, and Polish.
And so were they residents there, or were they just brought in to do labor?
Exactly, the latter. They were primarily laborers. But the Russians, most of them probably were citizens.
I see, okay.
There was a huge Russian immigration starting in the 70s, but also after the Soviet Union collapsed in '89, about 2 million Russian people came to Israel in the 90s.
Considerable influx of people. That's a large number to have to, for a society to have to assimilate, especially with the varying culture as well. You know what I mean? True, they're all Jewish by their religious faith, but bringing in somebody that's used to Eastern Bloc situation. That must have been hard for them to integrate at first, I'm sure. Also, you being an American person there in Tel Aviv, how were you perceived generally? Did you have a sense that you were safe generally, or did you have a sense that, you were in danger? And if there was that sense, what would be a perceived threat to you personally that you would feel?
In Israel proper, I never felt any kind of danger. When you start traveling to some of the border areas or in the West Bank, then you have to be careful. But the vast majority of the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Israeli Arabs in Israel proper are very peaceful, kind people. And there's just a few extremists that turn this thing into a conflagration, is the word you used, and that's basically correct. But in Israel, it's a very safe country. Walking the streets is much safer than here.
So even late at night, you wouldn't think twice about it?
No problems. There's almost no street crime in Tel Aviv. In Jerusalem, there's some purse snatchings and stuff like that, but there's not much crime.
Would you be able to go to, let's say, your proverbial 7-Eleven at midnight or 2 a.m. to grab a soda or something?
No problem, absolutely no problem.
Okay, so there are 24-hour businesses and what have you. It's not where it's shut down.
Some of the convenience stores do run 24 hours, but most everything closes down after dark.
And you said that there are quite a few cars, vehicles, trucks, what have you on the roads, and
too many.
Too many.
Bicycles.
Bicycles is the way to go, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that mentality fits well in Austin, so you're right at home with that kind of thinking. And you never felt personally like you were being dissed, let's say, for lack of a better word, that you were being disrespected as a result of you being American, being a foreigner, living amongst this group of people, that you were maybe not getting the fair end of the getting a fair shake in whatever instance.
No, the primary problem for me was the language barrier. Though most Israelis under 40 speak English, probably 90% of them, and many of the older folks do, they prefer to speak in their own language. And if you make an effort to speak Hebrew with them, and then they realize when they're answering back to you in Hebrew you don't understand, they switch to English. But you must make an effort.
Very good. Yeah. And also another thing too, to kind of let people grasp as well, the percentage as far as the numbers. If you were in Tel Aviv proper, where you have the most experience because you lived there the longest, what was the breakdown in numbers between the so-called Palestinian or the Islamic residents and the Jewish or Israeli residents? can you give a rough breakdown as far as numbers, percent-wise, or what have you?
In Israel proper, there are
okay.
approximately...
Go ahead, Israel proper.
In Israel proper, there are approximately 6 million people. About 1 million are Arabs. They are Israeli Arabs. They live in Israel, but they are Arabs. That means of the Arabs in Israel, probably 80% are Muslim, and the other 20%, let's say 15% are Christian, and then you have Druze and Bedouins. And technically, the Druze and Bedouins are not Arabs, and they don't like it if you refer to them as such. But and the other 5 million people are Jewish Israelis. Okay, and then if you go inside the West Bank and Gaza, in the West Bank there's about 200,000 settlers. Okay, they are Jewish Israelis living in
that's the so-called
in a region. It's the so-called occupied territories.
Okay.
But living in the West Bank are approximately 3 million Palestinians. Down in Gaza, it's almost all Palestinians, something like 2 million, approaching 2 million, and maybe 5,000 settlers.
Let me ask you this: what's your personal opinion about the settlement that's going on by the Israeli citizens that are for some people's perception, it seems like they're encroaching more and more and trying to expand their grab on the area. And I'm not saying that's my particular slant on it, but I'm saying that's how some people perceive the situation, that they're trying to encroach more so on the occupied territories. And that's one of the points of conflict.
I have no issue with the settlement problem morally. It's not a thing to me. I think when they were attacked in '67, at the end of the Six-Day War, Jordan had lost all of the West Bank and Jerusalem. Syria had lost the Golan Heights. And
So
Israel went there.
Spoils of war.
Right, they were attacked. It was a defensive war, and they won the land, technically. Does anybody own land? I don't know. But the government encouraged the people to settle the land, and the Israelis did that. I must concede that the settlement question is a huge sticking point for the potential peace process, if there is such a thing. Getting those people out of there would be very difficult. It would be an army coming, taking them, having to take them forcibly removed. Exactly.
And you did say that you did have access to American language newspapers and some media on the television as well, as far as the news and what have you was.
Indeed, there was a daily, it's called the International Herald Tribune, very good newspaper. And of course there's CNN Europe, if you have cable. And also every day in the evening there was news in English, and then on the radio there was a half-hour of news every day in English. So I was never lacking for information about what was going on around the world or
and you would pursue the
in
news
the
and try
country.
to keep abreast of what was going on.
Absolutely, I read the news every day.
And just to clarify for some folks out there, you didn't really go with a specific purpose to Israel. Can you explain a little bit of your whole, why did you decide to go there? Not even respective of the fact that you stayed as long as you did. Why did you initially go there, from Texas? Why did you leave from Austin and just say, hey, I think I'm going to go to Israel for a while and check it out? And what was your thinking behind that whole move?
Well, I've always been fascinated with the land. It's, for some reason, been a land of contention for 5,000 years.
The Holy Land in particular? Does that have an
I don't call it the Holy Land, but it's what is generally referred to as the Holy Land,
Right.
yes. For some reason, this little piece of country, not very big, about 70 miles wide and about 200, 300 miles long, that's it, has been the point of fighting and downfall of nations for a long time. And I thought, well, there must be something special about it. Maybe I can go see it and try to understand what is it about this place that makes people do strange things.
Right. What we would think of as extremist
Extremist situations, yes.
Why is this strong? And what did you come to find after that time? Let me ask you this, come to find that it is the land, that it is the landmarks, that it is the holy sites, that it is the mosques, the synagogues, and all of these things? Or did you find that it is the mentality of the people that is perpetuating the situation?
It could be a combination of both, but I think it's more the land. The land, it's a very special place. It's very, very beautiful, and Israel has 3 different climate zones. It's got the north, which is rolling hills with many, many trees. The center, which is plains and very fertile ground, and the south, which is almost 40% of the country, it's desert. And it's very nice. They have a nice port down in the very south in the town of Eilat.
Very much occupied desert.
No, the desert's almost empty.
Okay, that's interesting.
They're trying to push a settlement program for the desert, but it's having a hard time.
Well, they're going to have to get water down there and irrigation and that.
They've got all those things figured out, but just nobody wants to live down there because there's nothing there.
Huh, interesting.
No jobs and
well,
all
it kind
that.
of sounds like Los Angeles, really. If you hype it up enough, they'll come. Trust me.
And they have.
Worst case scenario, I guess.
Mm.
But again, so if you feel like if the Holy Land was leveled, if all of those artifacts were just razed to dust and nothingness, and they were just standing there, just looking around at each other, holding nothing, do you think that would satisfy them, or do you think that would just further, you just cause them, more anger and more ire among them?
I think the holy sites are significant. They are important. Many things happened there at the various holy sites, but I think at this point it's more of a national conflict. It's not. It's evolved into a national conflict from a religious conflict.
So it's mutated.
And now it's totally national, in my opinion. There is elements of religion involved, indeed, but I think it's really about the land. The conflict is about the fact that my grandfather lived in this village in 1948. 1949, there was no village, and the people were all sent to Lebanon or to Jordan on a vacation. And when they tried to come back, so sorry, you can't come in.
So, did you yourself have any special feelings or significance for this place, for this land, when you went there and you felt the vibe of it yourself and took it all in? Did you have this reverence or awe for this particular area, or or were you just confounded and confused?
I feel lucky to have been able to see it, and I did have some connection to the place, but it wasn't anything spiritual or religious. It was just as a student of history more, because so many things happened in that little tiny sliver of land, and that was my major attraction.
And do you feel like you came away with some answers as far as what is still perpetuating the conflict? What are some possible scenarios? Did you get a feel for what might possibly be coming down the pike?
Coming down the pike, I think, is a conflict.
Bottom line, conflict.
I think so. It's become such a national thing that you have most of the countries surrounding Israel not very happy with Israel.
Very true.
And you have, even in their Israeli parliament, the Knesset, there are Arabs in there that openly discuss state concerns with Syria, with Lebanon. They go to Iran, Iraq.
So it's almost like a double agent situation, you'd think.
Right, but they're operating completely in the open because they're members of the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament.
That's very interesting. And maybe that would be like our Congress in the sense that you have, your Republicans, Democrats, you've got the Senate, you've got the House, and they may be seeming to, they may appear to have some political ideology, but in reality, in actuality, what they actually do, what's in their heart, is completely different than the guise they present to the public. And I think that may be the case in that instance as well, that you've got the role players that, are not really, I don't know, that just are kind of, it's like a dog and pony show, if you
Except
will.
these guys aren't making any illusions about where their loyalties lie. They lie with the Arab population, not necessarily with the Jewish Israeli.
That's very interesting. Like that. That's very fascinating to me. And so there probably are a lot of people that feel that there is a potential, again, and there's been conflict in the Mideast region. We can go back since the inception of Israel, and there's been conflict in that region before, certainly, as well. But if we just want to concentrate from the time that Israel was kind of, some people say forced into existence, what have you. However it was created, and you've got this country of Israel that's going to be for this Jewish people, there has been, escalating, let's say since the 40s on up, and then you get your various, as we spoke about earlier, 67, 73, 82, you find every so often you get a pretty big, kind of like an earthquake maybe, you get a big, significant one that rumbles up. And so we've seen this before. We've seen these patterns before umpteen times, but people now are really kind of a little bit more gun-shy. They're a little bit more wary of that particular powder keg. And so why do you think now it's different? What do you think some of the circumstances of today are that are making things different in people's perception as to the severity, the real deal of the whole thing?
I think a lot of it has to do with Arab dictatorships. The populations that live under every Arab country except Morocco, well, even that's a constitutional monarchy, but anyway, they're all dictators. And the people live under these dictatorships and are kept ignorant of other possibilities. They don't have to hate Israel, but that's what their governments want them to do, because the more these illiterate Arabs are hating Israel and thinking we must kill the great Satan and the little Satan Israel, then that's distracting them from hating their own dictator leader.
Right.
So there's a lot of that going
an
on.
enemy for them
Indeed.
to hate.
Indeed.
And so we find at a very young age, unfortunately, and that's not with all of the Palestinian individuals, obviously, not all the people in the Middle East, not all of the people that follow Islam, not all of the people of Arab descent, on and on in that region. They're not all fanatical. We have to really, really emphasize that
Indeed,
point.
indeed.
Not all, and you,
I think the vast majority are peace-loving, kind people, but there are extremists. They do have legitimate issues, in my opinion. There are things that need to be addressed in Israel, but is suicide bombing the answer? No.
Right, exactly. And so we find that these young people are hammered with this propaganda very early on, and they're shown that, in some instances, that a way of martyrdom is the way to go. And they're praised for this action and this thinking and the way that they're taught from an early age. Now, again, it's not in every instance, but we do have examples of that. And unfortunately, the big key to this whole thing is this is what we have as our perception in the American media. This is what we see, this is what we're taught, and this is what we're shown. The fanatical Arab and, poor little Israel is cowering in the corner and they can't even help themselves. Now, that's not a very fair assumption of the whole situation, because we know Israel is very capable of handling herself and defending herself, and she gets considerable help and assistance from us in billions of dollars of aid. And so we know that Israel is not incapable. But again, when you have a propaganda program that you do among the Palestinians in some instances, that is making them think this way from a very early age, and that's hammering this mode of thinking home generation after generation, after a while that becomes truth for these people. That becomes ingrained into them, and that becomes a way of life that they feel that they have to pursue at all cost. Now again, that's not in every instance, and again, that is largely our perception, unfortunately, of every person in the Middle East. A lot of Americans have that in their thinking, that everyone in the Middle East is like that. They're just crazy Arabs. There's nothing we can do, and we're all at their, we're all, we have to be at their whims. And that's definitely not the case. So really, I think education is very much the key in this situation that we have to understand, and that's why I was very eager to have Cliff come on as a guest, because he could show from his own eyes, his own experience, what was going on over there, and to allow a little glimpse into Israeli life. Now, again, certainly the Israelis are going to have their own ideas, their own culture, and they're going to be taught their own way as well. So they're taught certain things as well too. And so you've got this being brought up, at the very least, distrustful of one another. Now again, we can have just diplomacy until we're blue in the face. We can send all of the diplomats over there and we can get a Saudi peace plan together, what have you. But until there is actual goodwill among these two factions, until there are human relations among these people in this area, you cannot force peace on any people. And that is what I really want to also get across as well. We cannot force peace on these people. We have to nurture them in their own way and help them to find their help them to find their own ways out of these problems. Certainly, giving them aid is one thing, and we want to let them have their own sovereignty as well. We want to let them be able to carve their own destiny. But I think there is a way where people just can get their thoughts together, if you will. People on a worldwide basis can get their thoughts together, and not just the Mideast situation, but any conflict, whether it's the Ireland conflict, where you still have tension between Catholic and Protestant, many places around the globe, where there is fighting, and that if we can just not be so isolated, get past our American way of life, get past our, me, and the gluttonous thinking, because didn't some of the Israeli folks that you met, they made comments that the Americans were kind of overweight and that sort of thing, and they seemed maybe somewhat lazy and that sort of thing?
Yes, I think
There's a
having visited
perception.
America, I did meet many that said, my goodness, there are many obese people in the United States.
And to see, that's a sign for them. That's basically
It's just one of the first things they see.
Right, but that is a
But
big sticking point for them in their minds, that they see, oh, look, there's a fat American. He's gluttonous. He's lazy. He's slothful. You know what I mean? He's non-productive. He's big. He's a big person. He's non-mobile. And that's the perception I think that a lot of other countries have of America, where there's this big, fat, bloated thing pointing the finger with our dictates and directives towards different countries, and we're trying to get our fingers in everybody's pie, and that's the perception that the other countries have of us. And so again, I think that it's very crucial to have education, and for us to educate ourselves as to the larger reality. And certainly, if you go to a country, visit with your own eye and see with your own eyes what's going on, that's going to be the surest way. And travel is a great dispeller of ignorance. When you go somewhere and you meet a people, then you realize, hey, maybe these people are not so different from myself. And certainly there are cultural differences, and certainly there's differences in civilization and what have you. But we're all human, and that is the one key fundamental thing that is really important in my estimation to keep firmly in mind. We are all human, and we can get past these little spats that we have. Maybe they're big spats, and maybe they've been going on a long time, and maybe they're deeply ingrained, and we really have strong feelings about our particular beliefs. But I do believe, as we're moving forward into this intellectual age, into this more of an enlightened age, if you will, with certain factors that are coming down the pike that are going to allow for this, that we're going to be able to make more use of it. And what's your personal opinion on that whole thing? How do you see? I mean, because I know you have a little bit of a different, varying opinion than myself on this. As far as on a world scale, what do you think the potential is for persons to kind of start getting together, start looking past ethnicity, look past religion, look past these kinds of things that divide us, and to start having an opportunity to come together, like-mindedly, and to work together? Do you see any potential for that?
I think anything's possible, Corey, and I try to remain an optimist.
Right.
But it's hard to answer that with a positive feeling that you're not being
Right. Well, I want you
naive.
to, be as upfront and honest about it as you can from your own perspective, because you're my guest. I want to get your half of what's going on here, so we can get this, get a well-rounded whole, hopefully.
Right.
And you do feel like things are maybe a bit more grim in that respect?
I think people could come together, but just not on grand scales. You're talking something like 6-7 billion people in the world.
Right. And I would never say that
societies can be successful in the way you're talking about. But you're talking about a whole city of people acting in concert, acting with one or two basic similar goals in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's going to be tough to go from the society that we've created up to this point into a future where you're talking about where you're seeing past basic things and you're thinking about more than just survival.
Being more inclusive. Exactly. You're not thinking about just your bare survival. You're thinking about a more inclusive situation on this planet between all inhabitants, if you will.
It's possible.
But okay, let me ask you this as well. As far as the whole propaganda movement, that we get our propaganda here in the States and we're taught a certain thing. In the Middle East, it's whatever they're taught. And you've got these certain different media conglomerates and your different media moguls and different factions that are spinning, if you will. The news, for instance, and I'm sure we're all aware of that, how the different editors and the different newspapers and what have you are going to have a different particular spin depending on the topic, as how they want to portray it for the general public. Now, if there were to be less of this manipulation, if there could be less of this propaganda, and people could be able to discern what was true for themselves more so, do you think that would be a helpful thing?
If people had direct access to news, that would inform the public, but I can't remember the numbers exactly, but something like 3 or 4 times as many people read Reader's Digest as they do any kind of
What you would consider a
product
legitimate news
worthwhile. Yeah, that's not really a news source. It's about things that's going to be on television and those
Right.
things. But they're not really paying attention so much. I think most people don't really care. They're happy with the status quo. They've got a house, they got a car, they're very comfortable.
Right.
And the American people are living better than anybody else on the earth.
Okay, and that's one thing I'd like to bring up too, the relation of that.
And I think most people are happy with that. I don't think they want to change it.
So even though we may be somewhat controlled, and from some people's perceptions, there's enough people that don't mind the controls or are unaware of the controls, so that they carry on with the status quo, as you say, and they're either oblivious or they don't mind that there's constraints on them. And so they're just going to wage on and just carry on and continue on because that's how it is and that's how it's going to be, basically.
That's the way it's always been.
Right, okay. And see, I think that mentality, I feel like, is really falling by the wayside. I consider that kind of thinking part of the old, and I'd hate to get into the new age thing again. I hate that term, but astrologically, we move from age to age. In the Piscean age, we're passing the age of devotion to a political ideology, age of devotion to a particular religion, age of devotion to being what my father was, because my father was, and his father was, and it was good enough for him, and it's good enough for you, and that sort of thinking. We are getting past that into more of individuality in a way, and more of our free will, but also more inclusive thinking. Ultimately, where everybody can be sovereign, but yet understanding and appreciative of the others. And that's kind of the golden rule, if you will, do unto others. Be able to do what you want to do, as long as you're not imposing and infringing on someone else's free will, someone else's free mobility. And it's a delicate balance to walk that walk, but I think that's part of what can take place if we can consider, again, that we are manipulated by the media, by advertising, many different things, that we're swayed to and from as, that we're made out to be this certain cookie-cutter type individual, made to fit contemporary community standards. That is the key term that usually is used to describe how they want the citizens to be. They want them to be basically Stepford people in a lot of instances, that everybody thinks the same thing, and they don't want anybody rocking the boat, making waves, going against the grain, and kind of, showing a living example of somebody that's bucking the system, that's just saying no, as I spoke about previously in a previous show. Taking one's responsibility and just saying no if you see a program or there's a law, for instance, that you don't feel is proper and right. Don't obey it. Trust your intuition. That's my personal feeling on the whole matter. And I'm not telling anybody to rush out and to disobey the law, but certainly through your intuition if certain things are right, just plain right or wrong. And there are certain things that we know full well are wrong, that are given to us through laws and different kind of manipulative, controlling factions that are infiltrated, into our lives. That we can just say no to these things. And the more people that collectively say no, the more of a leg we have to stand on to kind of take things back. And I think that's part of a very big part of this. Also, I want to touch again about the idea that people do tend to think of the whole Middle East situation as a powder keg and potential Armageddon, that the potential conflict there will be of biblical proportions, and that this is part and parcel of what is spoken of in the scriptures, in the holy books, in the Bible in particular. That people feel like Revelations is coming down the pike right now, and that at every turn, you look at the digital angel, the implantable chip technology, in conjunction with the current, raging going on in the Middle East, between Israel and the Middle East, and all of the current things that are going on right now that people can point fingers to and say, see, there this sign is, there this sign is, there this sign is. And it's very easy for people just to look at that on the surface and say, hey, come on, look, it's obvious that we're having a World War III, an Armageddon situation. Now, I firmly, myself, don't feel that that's the case. I feel like that there's, that we're being manipulated to have that perception. And that's probably a subject for another show, and that's getting a little bit more out there than I want to stay with this particular topic today. But nonetheless, I do feel like that manipulation is there if we can just kind of raise our heads enough to be aware of it, and that there is potential common ground for folks to come together upon, and that we don't have to have an Armageddon situation. This doesn't have to blow up to that point. And really, again, if I can borrow a phrase, a quote that I haven't used in a long time, that very well fits into what's going on here. And this is a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Great men are they who see that spiritual is stronger than any material force, that thoughts rule the world. And that being the case, thinking about that, a thought is a thing. A thought is a substantial thing. And thoughts add up, and they accumulate. And when thought upon thought upon thought adds and collects, that becomes mass consciousness, excuse me, public consciousness. And that is when things change. When the public says it is so and perceives it as so, then that is the reality for all intents and purposes. And so as we can mold and shape perception of the public, then we can find a way to create the kind of world that we want to live in which the monetary system, the education system, governmental, every aspect of human endeavor has something for humanity inclusively, and not just for this little camp here. Oh, we're going to specialize and give these guys this, we're going to give this guy this, we're going to make a subsidy for this particular group. You know, when you start picking one over the other in that respect, you start to generate more animosity. Well, how come this guy's getting handout? You know, this guy's getting handout over here. And that, again, it generates resentment. And that's what we have to get past. We have to get past skin color, religious ideology, political differences. These are the things that are going to keep us limited if we can't take the first big step forward, get our heads out of the sand, take a look around, and try to educate ourselves as to a larger reality. Again, travel is fantastic. Travel is a fantastic way to expand your realities. Please talk about that a bit. I've kind of been neglected you here this past few minutes, again on a rant here. You're the type of guy that's just going to jump out there and travel. You know, you don't need a place to lie your head. You don't need necessarily some people to go stay with. And you've never really had a set place to go stay when you've gone off on these little jaunts. You kind of just, you know, jumped out there and just jumped in feet first and just were going to just check it out. And that, for some people, that kind of bold, you know, kind of Lewis and Clark mentality is kind of lost. You know, people, that's a fine art that's really been lost. People are so scared to do anything that's not safe. You know, they don't want to sleep on the side of the road in Ireland, you know, and
It's probably not a good idea.
but hey, you know what I mean? Somebody's got to do it. And somebody's got to still have that fire inside to want to see something that's not just, you know, my backyard. You know, it's true we have the internet, true we've got Discovery Channel or whatever, and we can learn more than we've been able to in the past by virtue of these things, technology and what have you. But nothing can substitute for going to a place, personally. And I haven't really traveled that much myself. My travels are somewhat limited too, but I've been around a few other countries, and it really blows up in your perception. You just are amazed at the simplest things. You're amazed at, you know, again, how they get by. What's their monetary system like? You know, what are the hours of the convenience stores? Do they have convenience stores? Any number of things. You know, in Germany, you're able to just urinate in a public place. Not a big deal. You're not going to get a fine if you take a whiz just on the street or in an alley. It's perfectly legal there. And that would amaze some people, that you have that freedom. Something that we would, you know, a guy in particular would just take completely for granted that we would be able to do that. You would think, yeah, if you have that urge, that need to relieve yourself, go for it. And we take it for granted because here you can be fined for it or even arrested for that sort of behavior. But in Germany, it's perfectly normal for you to do that sort of thing. And so it just, again, it's a perception as to culture and what's important and what's not, and how we can educate ourselves by travel. You know, expand upon that. Expound on the glories of travel, if you would, please.
Well, those of you who have traveled know that it's a mind-opening experience, and just being able to go to a place and learn how other people live. For me personally, it helped me to appreciate the United States, and specifically Texas, how amazing it is just to be able to live here. You're very lucky. Remember that.
We can never
very
forget
lucky.
That's true. Yeah, we never can forget that.
Go
We're
to
very
Egypt
lucky.
and see the way they're living over there, and you'll be very happy you were born here.
Right. As much as people do tend to complain about things here, you know, and I complain about things myself, I feel like, you know, to be aware of problems, if we want to change things, we've got to be aware of things, and we have to want to, you have to have the gumption to want to change. Certainly we have to also feel fortunate.
One's an old friend.
Okay. We have to be feel fortunate that we are here. So you know, just take that in consideration. If nothing else, you know, we can change things here, but we should be fortunate that we're here as well to be able to be given and granted the opportunity to change. I'd like to go ahead and take a call and see what's going on. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I can't hear you, Corey.
Keep talking.
Okay, now I can. TV. Cliff?
Yes.
Cliff, brother, it's good to see you alive. My God, man.
Who's this?
This is Sean Grant.
Sean Grant. How are you?
Yeah, thought you, man.
Get that full name plug in. Don't be shy.
Hey, and if you order now, get free set again tonight.
Hey, 1995.
Hey, no
Hey,
commercials.
there you
No
go.
commercials.
Man, it's good to see you alive, brother. Later on after the show, Corey knows the number. I'm not going to plug it. Give me
All
a
right.
call. Good to see you, Corey. I actually listened in, and think you ought to have him on as a guest more often because although y'all seem, there's a little, it's pretty good. There's a little opposite action there, a little bit. Same belief, different ways of going about it.
Well, I knew we wouldn't be able to agree on everything.
Oh, of course not. Hell, you and I don't. But still, I'll listen and I'll talk. And man, as soon as I learn all the big words, I'm on it. Give me a call, Cliff. It's good to see you live.
Hey,
Thanks, Sean.
I really appreciate
Talk to you later.
taking the time to watch, Sean. Take care of yourself. Have a nice evening. Yeah, that's great. It's good to, and I know there's other people, our friends as well, that are out in the viewing audience that are checking it out. And hello to everybody that remembers Cliff from a ways back. Yes, he is back in Austin, alive and well, and much more well-rounded, much more educated, and much more on top of things. And I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. If you stay in Austin in Texas long enough, I think that Access would be a prime place for you to kind of flourish and nurture your own interest and your own concerns about what's going on. I know you're an active person. You actually, like I said, get up and go and travel. And that in itself shows me that you're willing to go that extra step that most people wouldn't be. And that's the kind of person really that is generally the Access show person that feels really compelled to come down there and sit in front of a camera, whether it's a live studio situation or whether it's a tape segment, to get their point across. And again, don't mean to put you. Well, yeah, I do mean to put you on the spot. I think that if you're here in Austin, that you would be a fine candidate to have a show because again, you're very aware of things and you're very you have a humanitarian slant. You truly are concerned about your fellow man. I feel. Would you agree with that statement?
To a large degree.
To a large degree. Not everybody.
No, not everybody.
Okay. Well, hey, at least you're being honest about it. That's the main thing. And so, but it is something to keep in mind that, and you took all that, you went all the way to Tel Aviv, to Israel, and you stayed there that amount of time. And my thinking was the whole time you were gone, it's like, hey, if you wanted to check out a war zone, you should have stayed here, I mean, and what's your perception of what's taken place in the time that you've gone, and obviously, in particular, 9/11, September 11th incident, how has your perception of all that changed as far as, one thing in particular, America maybe being more vulnerable than she may have thought she was initially, and that sort of thing. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there really are people out there in the world that hate the United States and the Western world in general, and would love to see it destroyed. There are those elements. Were they able to perpetrate 9/11? Maybe. I think so, probably. I went to Israel. Possibly there is some kind of New World Order conspiracy. But I went over there and I realized, no, there really is a reason for national security. It's taken too far many times. The idea, well, it's for national security.
Right.
But I think that to a large degree, the United States government is trying to protect you and trying to protect its interests to further the ability of the American experience, to further it.
So you really feel like what they're doing with this security, Homeland Security, and all this new situation, this war on terrorism, is to keep the American dream alive.
Right, I think they're trying to protect liberty and protect freedom.
Well, okay, but what about the idea that we're having to give up liberty and give up security for this new edited version of liberty, security, and the American dream? This edited version.
Show me the liberties you've had to give up.
Okay, the airport, for instance, you've got the National Guard troops there in the airport.
They're not taking away my liberties.
Well, it's just a presence. And again, a lot of that, for me, what I have to bring up, a lot of this is psychological. And that, I don't know, you've been out of the country, but it's not like you've been gone that long. A lot of things are done for psychological stimulus, primarily. Having the armed troops there, having the National Guard is not going to prevent a terrorist attack by one iota. And no disrespect to our military, because I feel like we have the most capable military that there is. But that is just for psychological means, strictly. I don't feel like that's going to defend us. I don't feel one bit more secure now that Homeland Security is in effect. I feel more restricted, more limited, and I feel like my mobility is in question now. I'd like to go ahead and take another call quickly. Hello, caller.
Yeah, hi guys.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Yeah, I was wondering, I feel pretty adamant about what's going on in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, and I was wondering how you guys felt. I'm really pro-European, what the Europeans are saying about how the Israelis are really mistreating the Palestinians and how it's almost a genocide against the Palestinians. What do you guys think? I'll get off the phone now.
No, you can stay up for a minute. Okay, well, yeah, right.
I don't believe it is a direct order for the Israeli soldiers to abuse or mistreat or even commit genocide upon the Palestinians. There are instances of that where they knock on the door and the first person that opens it gets shot. But Israel's stated goals in the latest offensive that's been going on 5 or 6 days now, are to uproot terrorists. The Palestinian Authority was created in 1993, and one of the things that Arafat had to renounce in order to have the Palestinian Authority created was terrorism. He did that. He signed it. He shook his hand. You've seen the picture. In the last 18 months, there has been an exponential increase in the amount of terror acts committed and Israelis murdered because of these terror acts. They don't really have a choice. They must go into these cities and they must take everybody and filter them. Find out the people they want to take, arrest them, and take them back to Israel to try them in an Israeli prison for murder. That's what they're doing. Are innocent people being killed? Indeed, and that's very sad. The victims in this conflict are always the civilians, but specifically nowadays it is the Palestinian civilians. They are getting a raw deal. They've had a raw deal for 50 years. What is the solution? To erase Israel from the map? I don't think so. I think there will be ultimately a two-state solution with the Palestinians getting the West Bank and the Israelis having what is now Israel proper. Will there be a conflict coming before that? Yes, because it's growing pains. Anytime a nation is going to be born, there's going to be blood. It's just the way it is. But are they mistreating them? Are they committing genocide? I don't think so. If you look at the statistics, you'll see that terrorism has been perpetrated against Israelis much more than Israeli actions against the Palestinians. The Palestinian suicide bombers specifically target civilians. The Israeli army, which is only looking for terrorists, specifically targets terrorists. There's a major difference, a huge difference in that. So that's what I think about
My
it.
slant on the whole thing would be that I feel like that both parties are being manipulated behind the scenes. Religion is being propped up as the main thing. Again, the Holy Land is a place for them to have a battle, and all of these artifacts and all of these things that are on the land that mean so much to them. But I feel like they are being manipulated from behind the scenes through the religion and through politics and through the monetary system, just like every nation is. That is not separate from this whole thing, that we're all being tugged at. We're all part of the puppet strings, that we all have to deal with that and understand that larger control factor to get past it. For them also, as Middle Eastern and Israelis, to see past these seeming differences and see who's perpetuating all of this stuff behind the scenes that's causing this conflict, this rift between us. I'd like to go ahead and grab another call quickly. Hello, caller.
Yes, it's me.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, is your guest there not aware that the government was behind the 9/11?
Well, he just got back into the States. Quite frankly, how long have you been in the States now?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And since I lean towards that, I have been trying to put a bug in his ear, quite frankly. And I'm trying to say, hey, this is what I believe. Don't necessarily believe it just because I believe it. And he doesn't, thank goodness, you know what I mean? He's putting it on the shelf, but he has gained some understanding. I'll let him speak for himself, actually. Go ahead and speak for yourself, I'm sorry. And say what your estimation of the whole thing is.
I think it's possible elements in the government, the United States government, could have done it. I don't put it past them. They made Vietnam, didn't they? But do I think they did?
It's kind of a proven fact,
Well, I haven't seen any proof personally. Perhaps you could show me some of your proof. I'd love to see it.
Well, David Shepard's the head prosecutor. He has all the
See, I've been telling him all this stuff, my good man. I've been telling him this stuff, and
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see that evidence come to light.
Well, okay.
He will. He'll check it out.
Are you aware that Israel had an office building in the 9/11 building,
Yes, I am.
and they pulled out a week before the bombing?
That's been a oft-repeated statement in the Arab press, the official Arab press,
Really?
and frankly, it's ludicrous. It is true that there were Israeli offices in there. It is true that some of the employees in those offices did not go to work that day, but a huge amount of Israelis, I cannot emphasize that enough, a huge amount, we're talking hundreds of Israelis were killed in both towers. There was not this Hebrew conspiracy. Hundreds of Israelis died on September 11th. If they didn't get the word, perhaps they weren't in, I don't know. But
That's possible. It's possible.
that is a fact. That is a proven fact. You can look that up anywhere.
I don't have any knowledge of that myself as to whether or not, that's true or not.
If you're suggesting the Mossad did it, then maybe you can go read some Arab newspapers to get more information, because it's full of it. You can find it
Bottom
there.
line, there's going to be a slant one way or the other. So obviously the Arab world feels that they had an in on it.
It's repeated in the official Arab press. The Mossad blew up the World Trade Center.
Okay, so maybe not the Palestinian people per se, but at least some editorial.
Oh, in Saudi Arabia, the origin of the Saudi peace plan, just a week ago, that's what appeared in their paper. Something to that effect, that the Mossad perpetrated the 9/11.
Yeah, interesting. Let's go with another call and see what's going on. Hello, caller. Go ahead.
You need to show him some of Alex's stuff. Straight on this.
Okay, that's the
All right.
Okay, appreciate
Y'all
the call.
have a good evening.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you for that. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, hello?
Hello.
Go ahead.
Never been on air before.
First time for everything.
Yeah, first time for everything. Just enjoy
Sorry,
yourself.
I felt dumb. I better go now.
No. Hey, relax. You want to be on hold for a second?
Yeah.
You may pitch on hold and you can get your ideas together. Get your
Okay,
thoughts
that'd be
together.
great.
Okay, hang on for a second. Hang on.
That was her.
Yeah, I think she's still there.
Okay.
Caller, go ahead. Hello, caller?
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
Go ahead.
What did you say? No. You guys look like faggots.
Oh, thank you.
Fucking.
You have a lovely evening there, and I will
He has
say-
a lovely vocabulary, doesn't he?
Well, we get these guys that have a master's degree in Discovery Channel or a master's degree in the Learning Channel.
I think it's PlayStation, Corey.
PlayStation.
Yeah.
That must be it. Okay. And they're very well rounded, and they say the big words when they come on TV, and they impress
Okay,
their
let's go on.
friends.
Let's move forward.
Right. Good point. Hello, caller, you on the air?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Hey, going back to what the gentleman in the black sweatshirt said.
Yes.
You know, half of those guys that didn't come to work that day, you know that in our lifetime, always going to be some casualties of war, just like the Vietnam War. So I think it's more to it than what the government is leading us on and what they're saying, you know, about what's going on. You know, I watched a segment on Channel 10 one night where this gentleman was showing that the United States want to run some type of oil or pipeline through the country that they're fighting in, through Pakistani or some kind of way. They want to run the oil pipeline, and that's what this whole deal is about. It's not about the World Trade Center.
Well, that's certainly part of it.
It's about that they want that oil that is over there, and until we as normal human beings wake up and stop letting them do us like this and treat us the way that they're treating us, and just tell us anything. You know, the government's been lying to us years about everything. Vietnam War, the assassination of Kennedy, the assassination of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, everyone that comes out and speak the truth. And right now, you had a gentleman come on TV the other night saying that his father killed Martin Luther King. And you have heard no reaper call on that. I don't know if you guys seen that.
No,
I did see that.
You
did?
see that?
Yeah. And James Earl Ray supposedly only purchased the rifle.
Yeah, he just purchased, but the gentleman father killed him. That's what I say. The world is so corrupt with what's going on. It's all about money. And the military and the people in the high government officials, they know exactly what's going on, but they're too afraid to talk because they're afraid of dying themselves.
But I think more people are coming out, though. You'll find that. And I think, if you're watching Alex Jones things and those sort of media outlets here on Access and what have you, you're going to find that there are more people that are kind of sticking their neck out, and they're so tired of it that they cannot keep up with the lie anymore. Their hearts are very heavy, and people are getting older as well. Their hearts are heavy, and they don't want to lie anymore. They want to just, let the cat out of the bag. And that's our hope, I feel like, is that people can come together, get past the race stuff, get past all the phony stuff, and realize, hey, we're all down here for a reason, and we can help one another out. And we can make this a world that's good for everybody, where everybody has a piece of the pie, and we can respect one another. And that's my hope.
Sounds good to me.
Because you think about it, they started talking about, well, we need security here, but the borders are still being left wide open.
Very
for people to
true,
come
very
into
true.
the country. They just talked about the border up in Canada. There's no one patrolling that, but yes, they want to put all these regulations on us
Right.
in America. And what have you and I and the gentleman said next year, we're not criminals, we're not no terrorists. So
I really don't feel that way, but hey, you're here these days, guilty until proven innocent, unfortunately, and
well,
we
I
have
appreciate it, guys.
we have to change that.
Good call, thank
Thank
you.
you for your time. Appreciate that. Have a nice evening. Okay, caller, I'm going to go back to the caller on hold and see if you've got some insightful comments. You've got only a couple minutes left, so I'm going to let you try this again. You ready? Caller, are you there? Hello, caller? Are you there? Hello?
Turn down your TV.
Caller? Okay, I guess we're not getting there. That was cool.
Good sound effects.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess the young lady that was going to hold, I'm not sure if she's still there anymore or not. We've got a few minutes left. I guess we can maybe possibly squeeze in one last call, but let's go ahead and wrap up and say what you'd like to say as far as the finishing couple of minutes, and some things that you'd like to leave with the viewing audience.
Well, as far as Israel is concerned, it's a very complex place. They have a lot of problems internally, but when united, the Israeli people is capable of almost anything. And that's where they are right now. They are united, I think, the vast majority of people, against terrorism, against the Palestinian Authority terrorist structure, not necessarily against the Palestinian people.
Right, good point to make.
I think most people over there are in favor of a two-state solution, which it's just logical, it's going to happen. But I think the extremists on both sides, but specifically on the Palestinian side, because they're left no other option, are going to take this conflict into an abyss, and it's going to be a fight to the finish. But there will be survivors on both sides to pick up the pieces and continue, which is a very natural thing. It's going to happen. There's nothing to be scared of. It's part of the growing pains of life. And
So you see a conflict.
statehood.
You're seeing a conflict. You don't really see any way around a conflict.
For sure, eventually. Perhaps not tomorrow, but eventually.
Well, let's hope that's not the case. That's certainly my hope. Is that
I hope so, too.
There won't have to be further conflict. I know that's being very fanciful and that's being extremely optimistic, but somebody's got to be on TV and be somewhat optimistic.
there's one more
And
call,
hope
huh?
that things are going well. Let's go and try to grab another call quickly, see what's going on.
Hello?
Yes, you there? Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hello?
You're there? It's you.
Yes?
Go ahead.
You.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, caller, I'm not going to be able to communicate with you, apparently. No, the guy wasn't going to be able to say anything. So, all right, sorry about that, caller. We've only got 1 minute left, really, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I would like to thank Cliff for taking the time to come down. I really appreciate you coming down. Like I said, as soon as you left for Israel, I was anticipating, once I got the show together, anticipating having you as a guest and being able to share your insight from actually being in Israel to see what was going on.
It's not how it is on TV.
Right, exactly.
Remember that.
Right, that's what we have to keep in mind. Get past what we see on TV.
Nothing
Get
like it is
past
on
the
television.
box, get past the programming. I'd like to thank my producer Chris for commanding the helm of the starship Esoterica. I'd like to thank a couple of these greasy rascals, Jeff and Rick, for creeping around the control room. And I'd like to encourage everybody to stay tuned for Chris Athanas and the Reality Expander television show. Obviously, those guys are doing great work, trying to bring out some great information. I'd like to encourage you guys to stay tuned every Tuesday, Channel 10, from 8 to 9 p.m. We're here live, so check out Esoteric Science Roundtable again next Tuesday. Thanks.